Chasing the Dragon podcast with Connecticut's funnest, coolest, maybe most interesting martial artist, Chris Smith. Our guest today is John Durrett. John Durrett, I'm going to say this wrong, not intentionally, but I'm going to say this wrong, is the strength and conditioning coach at Underdog MMA. He is also a lifelong martial artist, but he could describe himself and what he does a lot better. And yeah, so anyway, this is John Durrett, my good friend. There. So, what is your official title?
Oh man. So the one that's I guess like the most important is I am a certified strength and conditioning specialist.
Okay.
With the National Strength and Conditioning Association. So that's like the mouthful.
Yeah.
SCA, CSCS. My job at Underdog, and that's like I have way too many other certifications. I have like 14 of them, something like that. Everything from, affiliation with this company, Power Athlete, to I'm trained to coach gymnastics, and I'm trained to work with kids, and I'm trained to teach yoga and weightlifting, all this. But it's been like anything else in life, I think you want to learn as many things as you can.
Sure.
And you want to be the most well-rounded. I've always wanted, and the reason I got the CSCS was to be able to say that's like the highest accreditation you can get without getting like a master's degree or a doctorate.
Okay.
And some institutions value it as highly as a master's degree or a doctorate. And I mainly got it so no one could ever close the door in my face.
Right on.
Right? So no matter where I go, whatever job I want to do in this field, like if I show that ID, oh, we didn't know, sir. Come on in, right? My job at Underdog, I am the head strength and conditioning coach there. I'm also the general manager, which is much more of a headache than being the strength and conditioning coach. And it's been interesting because I have sometimes I'm working with someone who's a professional fighter. Sometimes I'm working with someone who's a hobbyist jiu-jitsu player. And then sometimes I'm working with someone who just wants to look better and feel better and improve their quality of life and has no interest in doing any martial arts.
Sure.
So it's really a spectrum.
Okay.
But
so let's dive into that. Everyone has an opinion on what they think. In your personal estimation, what's the biggest difference between the pro athlete and the hobbyist?
Okay. That's a really neat question. I think the biggest difference is actually that the hobbyist can get away with doing more strength and conditioning than the pro can. The pro, especially in if we're talking about combat sports, has to dedicate so much time to the refining of their art that they can't afford to spend a lot of time with me. So a big part of what I do is, one, try to convince them of that fact.
Sure.
and two, and two, well, they fall on one end of two sides of the spectrum, right? They're either they don't want to train with me, or they want to do too much with me.
Okay.
So I'm always fighting those two battles.
Wow.
Very rarely, every once in a while, I get one who comes in, just tell me what to do, coach, and I'm like, oh, thank God.
Right.
But you have to think about if your goal is to be high quality at striking and grappling and the merging of those two things, that's a lot of time.
Sure.
That's a huge time investment. And my goal as a strength and conditioning coach, and I've run into a lot of, everyone's got an opinion, who say, oh, you have to do this. And then I say, hey, let's try to find the least amount we can do with these guys. And I apply that idea of, excellence often is removing everything extraneous and just keeping the really important stuff in. So with my guys who are trying to make a run at being more competitive, I try to get, and this sounds nuts saying it to anybody, But I try to get them to really only work with me twice a week.
Okay.
And if I'm doing my job right, that should be enough. If they have the time, I'll do 3 days a week. Okay. If they have the time. And then that runs into a whole other thing too, because oftentimes the hobbyists I work with, they live and or work near the gym.
Okay.
A lot of the higher level guys are traveling, maybe from across the state, maybe from another state. So they have less of an opportunity to be with me.
Right.
So a big part of the job is finding what's the minimum effective dose I can give these guys. And I look at two big things: minimum effective dose, and then maximum recoverable volume. So those are two different scientific principles, which are what's the least I can do with these guys to create the best change. And then I also want to keep the volume low enough of their training that they're going to get the maximum recovery, so when they go to do their wrestling class, their striking class, they don't ever feel beat up or worn down too bad from working with me.
Sure.
I think if you're working with a combat sport athlete, it's you're doing it right if they almost say, like, when I work with these guys, it's funny, they say, oh, I feel like, Coach Durrett's not doing enough, or we're not doing enough together. And then a lot of the guys, when they come out of their fights, they go, I couldn't have won that without you. Mm-hmm. And that's always my joke, is like, when we're doing it, everyone's like, either I hate you, this sucks. Yeah. Or I'm so nervous, we're not doing enough. And then when they go and compete, they go, that went really well. I was conditioned, I was strong enough, this went well. As far as, and then like the hobbyist, because there's no, I'm sure there's different levels of hobbyists, but that person can come in and train with me 5-6 days a week and only do jiu-jitsu 2 days a week, 3 days a week. And it's going to be much easier on their body to do that than to... I run into a lot of folks who try to say, oh, well, I'm going to use jiu-jitsu to stay in shape, and they get beat up, right? Where if someone's like, oh, I'm going to get in shape with you doing the strength and conditioning stuff, and then I'm going to take 2 or 3 days a week to work on my striking or my jiu-jitsu, that's my hobby, they actually get a lot more out of the classes, and they get less beat up.
I see that.
Yeah, so those are sort of the two different avenues there. The similarity for both, and I think the similarity for anyone I train, comes down to movement instruction and movement selection. So there's, hundreds of different ways to squat or press or pull.
Feet, this way.
Oh, man. There's so much stuff, right?
Yeah.
So, again, in the idea of searching for that excellence, I try to narrow it down to as few things that I can. And again, now we're still looking at what am I going to get the most bang for my buck, and what's going to help bulletproof somebody. So I look for movements that are simple to teach, that have a high yield benefit, and I look for things that are going to protect the body on the long term. So they're going to reinforce ligaments and tendon strength and make someone less likely to suffer an ACL injury or tear their rotator cuff, things like that.
Right on.
So that's where they sort of cross over in a big way.
Okay. As a martial arts coach or a performance coach, I have encountered people who are physically just gifted. Like, they can do whatever.
Yeah.
I've also encountered guys who were, I'm like, oh my God, you are a complete, absolute klutz. But they'll work.
Sure.
And they were highly coachable. My own personal experience has been that the coachable athlete, even though they might be clumsy, even though they might be slow to pick it up, in the end, if you look at the big picture, is much... You get a better product than the person who picks it up right away. I'm not saying it's right. I'd love to hear what your experience has been.
Yeah, I think the ceiling is a lot higher for those guys.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the ones who are more coachable, and I think it's due to a couple reasons. When you have natural talent, by the time, so there's a third group.
Okay.
The third group is the freaks who work hard.
Yeah.
Right? And
sure.
that group's important because group number one, the guys who are the freaks who don't work very hard and aren't very coachable, like, you know, I always imagine, like, maybe if you use like a metaphor with like horses or something, you know, these cats who are the hard workers, you know, they're like the workhorse. And so if we have to go, because this is a journey, right? We're going on a journey, right? And if we have to go over all these mountains and these passes, right? And you've got this like really fast stallion, it's going to do great out of the gate.
Right.
But then we're going to hit a couple rivers and a little uphill. And where that workhorse might have been a little slower getting out,
right?
You know, they'll make it through all those treacherous things, and then, you know, that. But to lose the metaphor for a second, what I see happen is the guys who are worse, they know they're not great, and so when they eventually run into the guys who are really talented, or the talented guys who work hard, they treat defeat the same way. They say, all right, well, I knew I wasn't perfect. I knew I had a lot of work to do. Let's go back to the gym. Let's work.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of times, the talented people, they run through a bunch of those less talented guys.
Mm-hmm.
And they don't learn how to work hard. Right? And then eventually they run into one of these real problems.
Mm-hmm.
Someone who's worked hard and been talented. And when they face that, they don't know. They lose. They have this crisis of confidence.
Yeah.
Because they're like, I thought I was the great one.
Yeah.
You're telling me this guy's the great one? He's the chosen one?
Yeah.
You know, like
yeah.
And then the ones who are just so special, you know, are these ones who, I've got to, you know, knock on wood, man. We got this kid at the gym right now who's like 12.
Okay.
And he's really talented and working really hard. And you're like, please stay the way you are.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because what happens is, you know, those guys, and I think what it is, it's a healthy perspective. Because maybe they know they're talented. Mm-hmm. They get it. All right, yeah, I do well. But they watch, you know, on TV, they see Anderson Silva. And they say, well, I'm good, but I'm not that guy. And they have that healthy perspective to say, I see where the ceiling is, right? I see how long the journey is. So I'm going to buckle in and work hard and develop. And if you can find someone in that third group, man, like that's golden.
Sure.
But if I had to prioritize, right, the third group, it's like winning the lottery. Like, I'm so glad this dude walked in the gym, but like, yeah. You know, when are we going to see one of those guys again? And usually, I in my experience, the athletes I've trained who've gone pro, they're usually that third group.
Okay.
You know, they're genetically gifted or innately talented, and then they work their butts off.
Right.
But if I had to pick, I mean, if you can pick, you want that guy. But then if I had to pick between just the hard worker or just the talent, I pick the hard worker.
Yeah.
Because it's less of a headache. That's a big one.
Yeah.
Because you're not managing.
Right.
There's a reason there's a term, managing talent. Right.
Yeah.
So that's a job in some industries.
Right.
They have a posse that has to wrangle the talent, right? And make sure they're well fed and groomed and all right. And that is its own headache. But the other thing is that they don't have that perspective. I think a lot of them, and that's why they don't work hard. Because they're blind to it. They're blind to the fact that, oh man, there's a ceiling so far above.
Sure.
You know. And I was actually, you know, it's funny. I was up this morning on Instagram scrolling, and there was the Bruce Lee Instagram.
Okay.
It was the clip of him and Inosanto from the 5.
Game of Death.
Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah.
And you know, I was watching that, and you just watch it like these guys are both so talented.
Yeah.
You know, but also they both knew. They see the ocean. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
They're like, yeah, we're both good, but like, the ocean's there.
Right.
You know, and there's somewhere down the dark depths, there's there's something else.
It's a great analogy.
Yeah.
Because it lets you know that there's more than what you just see.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And, what's been really great for me, I took a hiatus from martial arts for a little bit because I had done it most of my life, and I had met my wife. We were dating. I think I was 24, 25.
Okay.
And I just was like, I need to step away for a bit. Mm-hmm. Because I was getting really... I felt like I really wanted to explore more of the strength and conditioning world. Mm-hmm. And the way I've always been is an all or nothing kind of guy in a lot of ways.
Sure.
My wife and I were joking the other day. I said to her, I'm thinking about doing a jiu-jitsu competition for fun. Mm. And she said, can you do that? And I said, yeah, people do it all the time. She goes, can you do that? And I said, oh, I don't know. Yeah. Yeah. You might need to get an Airbnb somewhere for a month. Right. And I'll be a miserable curmudgeon. But so actually, Russell and I sat down. Mm-hmm. And he remembers this. And I said, I really want to give this a go. And he said, okay, martial arts will be here for you when you come back. Mm-hmm. Which was great. Almost like you can leave home and when you come back, the neighborhood's still here, the gang's still here. Go on your vacation. Yeah. Go abroad for a semester, and when you come back, we'll all still be here. And so I did. And it coincided right with the time I was becoming a college strength and conditioning coach. So it sort of all wove together at a really good time. And I spent 3 or 4 years competing in CrossFit, and I wanted to do all of it. Okay. CrossFit, strongman, powerlifting, and Olympic weightlifting. The only thing I didn't compete in was bodybuilding, because I just don't want to be... Nothing about that appealed to me. Being the bronzer and the bikini on the stage, I was like, no thanks. But I did the other big lifting sports. Sure. And it was such a great building of perspective for me, because I would go out and I would train hard, and I trained every day 3 to 4 hours a day. I would take rest days here and there, but I had the diet dialed in, everything was good to go, and you would just realize that you really didn't know how deep the water was. I get that. I went to this strongman competition, and it was in New York, and it was funny because I missed weight, because weigh-ins, just like in jiu-jitsu, and it was, I do to this day, I don't know what happened. I weighed myself at home, I didn't eat anything, I didn't drink anything, I was on weight, I guess my scale at home was off. Oh wow. I got there and I was like, and it wasn't worth trying to sweat it out in the bathroom or something, you know what I mean? Yeah. Because it was I was a pound or two over, and the competition was starting, and cause we had to drive to New York, so I had 20 minutes. I was I'm not gonna try to make weight. Right. So it was funny because if you somewhere on I deleted my Facebook, but somewhere in cyberspace there's a photo of me with the other guys in my weight class, and they're all a foot taller than me. So it's do, and then but I went, I competed, and I won. I got second place. I won a few of the events, but then there was the events that I lost. The margin of victory was so far, it was incredible. And the things I did well on were because I had a background as a martial artist. Okay. So there was a deadlift ladder, and it was you had to do whatever weight it was, however many times, and I won that because I knew how to really dig deep. You can't rest in jiu-jitsu. Right. You can't be I'll just take a little bit. No, someone's gonna choke you out. Someone's gonna break your arm off. The truth. You have to be willing to dig and fight. So I won that event, not because I was the strongest guy, but because I knew how to fight. Right on. But then one of the events I lost was the stone load. You had to pick up the boulder and put it on a shelf, and I got second place in that. And I lifted a 270 pound stone or something like that, and I weighed I was over the weight limit. I think I was 190 at the time, which is about what I weigh now. So I was pretty good. and I like barely got it up there, and the dude who won comes over and grabs a 320-pound boulder and picked it up like he was going to the grocery store, man. He was like, bloop, and they were like, do you want to attempt that? And I was like, no. So that was a really good lesson for me, though, was like, I had trained for months for this, and I had, really, gave my best effort, but there's people out there,
These freaks.
And actually, the second story I'll tell you about that same kind of thing, I'll tell you 3 of these because they're all really good.
Okay.
The second one, I was at a co-ed powerlifting competition, and Matt Mills, who was there with his girlfriend, and I was there with a training partner.
Does she compete too, or is she an athlete?
She was competing. She does not compete.
Okay.
Which is the best part of this story.
Okay.
So they were on a team together. And I think it was like he told her, this will be fun, let's go do it,
Okay.
And my training partner's there, and she's a strong chick. And we go in, and this was not even close to my best deadlift of all time, but at that time it was respectable for me. Because you never really, you compete, man. You never really compete 100% on game day.
Right.
It's always like, I'm going to be within 80-90% of my best effort. I think I pulled like 470 something, which was a pretty good pull for me back then. And my training partner pulled 360 something. And Matt, on his own, pulled 800 pounds. Right. And then like
he's that strong?
Yeah. Well, he was then. This is back when he was like a competitive strongman.
Okay.
And he has his pro card in strongman. He's a professional strongman. And like his girlfriend pulled like, who cares? Like 100 pounds, but they still beat us, Yeah. And in the only event we didn't lose to them was, so the only event in which Matt didn't basically outlive both of us was the press.
Okay.
Because I have a really strong overhead press, and that's probably the only reason we didn't get destroyed. But it was like, I remember my training partner, this girl Andrea, like we're standing next to her, we're just like, is this like, are those fake plates? Like, is this real life? Like, what's happening? Like, what's happening? And then the last one I'll give you, that's like a similar story. But in both these cases, that dude at the strongman meet, Matt Mills, both dudes who were really talented and then put a ton of time in.
Sure.
Matt's, it's easy to look at a guy like Matt and just think, oh, he's this big strongman. But Matt's got his master's degree in exercise science. And he has the same accreditation, the CSCS, that I have.
Right on.
And he teaches courses.
Wow.
He's a smart cat. So then I went to a seminar at another point for Olympic weightlifting, which was another sport that I competed in. And it was taught by this guy who had been recently the world champion. And he's a Russian weightlifter, this guy Dmitry Klokov, who's, you've probably seen videos of this guy.
Yeah.
He's one of the best to ever do it. And so I was really excited to go, because he taught it with Vasily Polovnikov, who was, I think, the Russian champion. So they both were in America doing like a tour.
Okay.
And it's funny because lifting is so, like any other country these guys go to, they're probably heroes, but it's such a small sport here that it was a neat, intimate seminar. And it was amazing because neither one of these dudes spoke much English. So like, Klokov would say something, and the translator would listen and go, Klokov says XYZ 1, 2, 3, And there was a great moment for me where he was coming around assessing all of our technique, and he gave me a bunch of good cues and stuff. And you're in like seminar brain mode, and I was doing the snatch, which is taking the weight from the floor overhead. And he comes over, he says something in Russian, and the translator says, Klokov says, your grip is too narrow. You must move it wider. And I looked at this guy who's the world champion. I go, are you sure? And I realized like I'm asking the world champion this, and he just stared at me. And I was like, you're sure, I'll move it out. Sorry, my bad, And there was this one dude there, I won't say his name because people might know him, but he was showboating the whole seminar. And he was one of these cats, because I ended up getting to know this guy a little bit. He's one of these cats who's not coachable, and just innately really talented. And he was like a football guy, former military, so he was strong, he was tough. But, every time we do a drill there, Klokov says, or the translator says, Klokov says, don't go heavy, keep it light, and be playful. And this dude was showboating in front of all his friends who were there and kept on going for heavy lifts and this and that. And you could see Dimitri looking at him being like, this idiot, But we go through the end of the seminar, and then it was great because Klokov says something in Russian, and the translator goes, Klokov says, now you may lift heavy, So, and me and my buddy are so smoked from the day, we're like, I don't even want to lift heavy. Because we've been doing a ton of skill work, and this guy who's been showboating goes over, and he does a clean and jerk, which is, the way he was doing it. You take the bar from the floor, pull it, squat under it, stand it up, and then go into an explosive overhead press. And it takes a lot out of you. If you do a real solid clean and jerk, it takes your body at least 2 minutes to recover.
Wow.
And that's if you're well trained. A lot of folks need 3-4 minutes to fully recover from that for the body to replenish ATP and so on. So this guy goes over, he hits his heavy, and we find out because he's got a posse there with him, and they're all celebrating, And this is the ultimate moment of, because Klokov is this guy, because he's from Russia, right? So I don't know if you know this. In Russia, you go to school, and because I've trained kids from Russia when I was at Trinity, we had 2 or 3 kids from Russia who were transfer students or foreign students who came to the U.S. And when you go to school as a kid, they tell you there's one day where you go into the gymnasium and you do all the sports. And they say, hey, you're playing tennis now.
They just tell you.
Yeah, and you're like, I like basketball. Too bad, you're playing tennis. And they pair you with the sport that you're sort of suited for.
Okay.
Klokov's dad, if I remember correctly, was also an Olympian in weightlifting. So his ticket was already written, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So when they were doing the day, they were probably like, lifter, and nope. And what's funny is the kids I talked to from Russia liked that. Because they were like, when as an American you hear that and you're like, they took your freedom away. But they were like, no, they picked a sport they knew I'd be good at, and 2 of the kids were only in the U.S. because they were so good at that sport, they got scholarships.
Okay.
So they were like, if they hadn't have done that, I wouldn't have known to do swimming, and I wouldn't have known to get this scholarship and all this. So anyway, so you have this guy who's the world champion. His dad was an Olympian. He's an Olympian. So genetically he's there, right? But he's also put in, and I talked to the guy a little bit and his translator, and he was like, my dad wouldn't let me touch something not other than a broomstick until I was 10. Until my form was perfect. And then I earned the barbell. What? And then I worked with the barbell, and then I earned the weights. And then I worked with the weights and I earned you know what I mean? So this is a guy this is the unicorn, right? He's genetically talented, and he's put in more hours. He's the dude who's practiced one punch 10,000 times, right? He's that guy. So he walks over to this dude who's celebrating over his lift, and in English, he says, "Is this your best?" And the guy goes, "Yeah," really excited. He walks over and just curls it. And it's fucking 300 pounds, man. He reverse curls it and just presses it over his head slowly, and then drops it and laughs and walks away.
Klokov says.
You just saw this dude just deflate. Because the world champ just came over and showed you that you're the world chump. But it was this neat moment where, and what's funny is I happened to, again, I knew the dude who was showboating. And he stopped competing after that. He did 1 or 2 competitions, and then all of a sudden, just stopped really. Okay. And sort of changed his focus and started doing other shit. But it's he could have gotten to that moment and said, wow, look what happens if you work hard.
Right. You think that's a cultural thing?
Which part?
The approach. You know what I mean? In other words, Klokov says, it's not just signing up and getting a job at the mall when you're a strongman world champion.
Yeah. So in Russia, I can tell you, at least, it's definitely a cultural thing.
Okay.
And they treat it very differently there. So there's a position in Russia you can get in any sport. If you went over to Russia right now, you could get this in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, whatever. And they call it a Master of Sport.
I've heard of this.
And it's an accredited thing. And it is a thing held with respect. And we don't have that here. And it's kind of a weird thing. You know, you might have a coach, but there's a delineation in Russia between being just a coach and being a master of sport. And it's a clear delineation, and everyone knows it.
That's exciting.
Yeah, and there's definitely a difference there in terms of I read this book, Sarah Kane. The book's called Quiet. And she goes over the differences between the Western and Eastern mindset. And in Russia, they have some of that Eastern mindset, too.
Sure.
Which is, in the West, a lot of times we're taught, and this runs into that, I think this is the primary cause of being uncoachable. In the West, we're taught you are an individual, you are an individual and there is society. And there are these separate things, right? In the East, you are intertwined with the society and the civilization in a way where it's like, they're often, they see themselves very often as like a cog in the system.
Yeah.
And I always think that must have something to do with some of these people who are so hyper individualized. Not that that's a bad thing, but because you can certainly be that way and also be coachable. But I think people become this sort of, when that ego gets too big, you know, and you're too much, I'm this special unique snowflake that needs, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I am detached from the system, right? Mm-hmm. It's almost like people who don't realize that we're still part of nature, you know?
Sure.
Like that same sort of thing, like you're not that different, buddy, you know?
Some people would beg to differ.
Oh yeah.
Some people would definitely beg to differ. How long have you been into wellness? Is that an appropriate way to say that? I'm using it as an umbrella.
Yeah.
I mean, because you're more than just someone who helps people facilitate or find their wellness.
Yeah, man, it's been a really weird part of my life. Mm-hmm. Because I never didn't care about it. Okay. And but as a kid, I was super overweight for a long time. Okay. Really starting in like middle school, I got pretty obese. And the weird thing is, I was still training. You know, and I was working out, and, you know, the spoiler alert, it was my diet sucked. But, and I spent way too many, it was really the diet. Everything else you can sort of excuse. But I started lifting when I was 12 years old.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and I always loved it. I loved going to the gym, and it was neat. My folks knew I liked it, so much to their credit, especially my mom, she went to we had this like local spot near us, and you know, their rule there was you had to be 16, and she went and was like, my kid's obese, he likes to do this, can you make an exception? And they were like, sure. You know, okay. And we had like a little squat rack in the basement with like maybe 100 pounds of weights. So I would go in the basement at least 2 times a week and hit the bench and do some like really terrible squats.
No shit.
I didn't know what I was doing, but I did okay. But this is a neat little. This is not a feather in my cap because part of it's terrible, but part of it's kind of cool. My senior year of high school, we had to do the fitness assessment. Okay. Which was a sit and reach, sit-ups, push-ups, and a mile run. Okay. And I was 18 years old, I weighed over 300 pounds, wow. And I passed the assessment. I ran a 9-minute mile, I did 20 push-ups, I passed the sit and reach, and however many sit-ups you had to do the sit-ups. So it's funny because, you know, it's like Russ and I had a good talk about this, where it's like, I know what it's like to be fat. I know what it's like to be out of shape in a lot of ways. But and this is my not him. This is my verbiage. I don't know what it's like to be useless. I was never okay with that. I was never okay with like. I could always, from the time I was a little kid till, I mean, right now, I could always do 20 chest to deck push-ups. And I refused to not be able to do that. That was inappropriate to me. And I could always do body weight squats and lunges, and I always ran. I didn't like it. It felt, when you're 300 pounds, man, running hurts. It feels terrible, but I could always do it.
So now, was this just your natural way of being, or did you have a mentor that, like, kind of inserted those habits?
That's great.
Practices?
Yeah. It's hard to say. I started martial arts super young because I remember my first reason for wanting to learn martial arts was very, I was 6 years old. So I don't remember exactly what was going through my head, but I remember it being driven by an idea of protection. Okay. And wanting to be able to protect people, like my family and, myself. And it was always like a self-defense kind of orientation on that.
Okay.
When I was young, I don't know when, my folks have always had, like, when I was a kid, they had an apartment in North Carolina. Now they live there. They have a really nice house.
Good for them.
Yeah. Right on the water. It's super nice. But when I was a kid, we had, like, a little, like, timeshare apartment deal. That was close to the beach. It was really nice. It was a great thing to have growing up. So my first summer in Connecticut, we moved to Connecticut when I was 6, from Chicago. And my first summer I spent in Connecticut, I was in college, going to UConn. So every summer we would go down, because my grandparents were down there on my dad's side, and we'd go down to North Carolina and see that side of the family. Okay. And there was like a local pool. I promise the story's going somewhere. All right. And maybe because I was fat, I don't know. I always preferred swimming to running. Okay. And I would go and I would swim laps, and I was in the water all the time. And one of the lifeguards there was this like super built bodybuilder guy, and he like took a liking to my twin brother and I would go there. And he took a liking to us and was like, these kids are great. And I think I asked him, somehow it came up where I was like, I've been doing some lifting, my idiot 12-year-old self, not really knowing what I was doing. And I was like, I don't look like you. And my mom was like, hey, can you maybe take the kids once in a while? Like, instead of us getting like a babysitter, you can take them to the gym and work out with them. So Tim Tucker was his name. And I see Tim when I go down south, because he still lives around there. But Tim, like, was the real... If I had done everything Tim had told me to do, I would have been lean and mean. But, you know what I mean? But he taught me how to train. And it was a very old school, like, Joe Weider bodybuilding style thing. So it was like, hey, today we're doing chest and arms, and tomorrow we're doing legs and that deal, and we're gonna run on the treadmill and do the bike and this and that. But that was my first real exposure to that side of things as a 12, 13-year-old kid. And my biggest issue was I am now so far on the other side of this, because I had a huge paradigm shift when I was around 20. But I was just stuck in this idea of, I am fat, and this is just the way it is, and it's the way I am, and nothing's going to change it, nothing's going to fix it. So I was still working out, and I wanted to be healthy.
You went there?
Oh, dude, I was this, because I had convinced myself, because both my parents were fat. Okay. And I had, a lot of people in my family were fat. And I had convinced myself that it was like a genetic thing. That like, and I was a kid, I didn't know any better, so like, and that was like a lot of stuff in the news then, was like you could be genetically predisposed to this and that, so I just thought like, there's nothing I can do about it, I'm just fat. And it's funny because now I run into clients who think that way, and it's like the shoe's on the other foot now, and I gotta convince them.
It's real easy for people to default to that, Yeah. How long have you been doing it?
The job?
Yeah.
This has been my job this is my 13th year.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. That's what I said when I thought about it the other day. Right? Because, yeah, I'm 32, so this is, I'll be turning 33 this year. So, yeah, it's 13 years.
So,
when I was like 18, what really happened was I graduated high school, and I had, my freshman year was just one of the worst years of my life in college. I thought I was going to go to this school and things were going to be, and I lost a lot of weight my freshman year. Because I went and I bought a bunch of books on nutrition and on diet.
Okay.
And I actually ended up being a vegetarian.
For how long?
About a year.
Okay.
Not every meal, but like 80 to 90% of the time. Because I had a friend in high school who was in great shape and was a vegetarian. So I was like, this must be the secret. This is going to change everything. And I did lose a good amount of weight doing that. And I was reading a lot of vegetarian books, so that was reinforcing that. Obviously not doing that now. But my freshman year, I had this scholarship to a college in Boston, but it was a merit scholarship. So they were going to pay my way.
Okay.
But I had to keep a 3.8 GPA. And they judged it...
3.8.
3.8.
Wow.
And they judged it 3 times a year. And I was miserable. So if at any point they came to check on me and one of those 3 times a year, and I had fallen below. So all I did my freshman year was study, and I would go to the gym to like decompress. And eventually I was not doing the vegetarian thing the right way. I was doing okay, but not great. And I must have had like an iron deficiency or something.
Okay.
Because I wasn't supplementing anything.
At all?
Nothing. Yeah. And I wasn't working. I should have found somebody to work with on it. Because you can do it, you know?
Yeah.
But I was trying to do it myself. And so then my sophomore year, I transferred to UConn. And I made a couple more changes. And then by the time I got to the middle of my sophomore year, I had dropped from 315 pounds to like 200 pounds. And that was when people were coming up to me being like, hey, I'll pay you to work with me. So that was how it all started. Was people had seen me lose all that weight, and they were like, hey man, like, can I come train with you? I'll give you $20.
You were like a walking advertisement.
Yeah.
Okay.
So when I started doing this job, I had no idea what I was doing. Because all I knew, and you know this from youth taught people, all I knew was what had worked for me.
Right.
And what works for me is not what's going to work for you or you or you or you. And my first several clients would come do like 2 or 3 sessions and then just never show up again. And I was like, all right, something is wrong here, you know? So then I started to say, well, maybe I should invest some more time in education on this. But I was going to school to be an English teacher. That was my goal.
That's a hell of a detour.
Yeah, so this was all like a side hustle in college. So that's, I should say, you know, this has been my full-time gig for a lot less than 13 years. Okay. I've been in it for 13. It wasn't really full-time until 2013, 2014 was when it really became like, I'm not doing anything else with my time. I'm just coaching. So what is that, like 8 or 9 years? Yeah. That it's been like nothing else has been going on in my life.
So, I'm sorry, I have an eyelash.
No, that's all right.
What's the easiest part of the job? And what's the hardest?
What is the easiest part of the job? The easiest part of the job... That's a good question, because there's a couple different ways I can answer that. Okay. Yeah. I think the way I want to answer that is the easiest part of the job is giving someone a hard workout and like beating them up. Okay. That's easy. Okay. And that's what I had to learn when I started out. Because I just beat people up. And that's why I didn't come back. Because they were just beat. And luckily, one of the people who didn't come back was a friend of mine. And I, well, because I reached out to him and I was like, what happened? He goes, dude, I threw up. He's like, I trained with you. I went to the bathroom. I threw up. I went home and threw up again. And he's like, I can't be doing that. And I was like, oh, I pushed this dude way too hard. It's easy to get someone to work hard. Like, you can really easily do that. And then, as a counterpoint, the hardest part of the job is managing the medicine, right? It's easy to give someone an overdose. It's really hard to say, take 1 teaspoon of this, no more, no less, wait 8 hours.
No one does that.
And then you can take another teaspoon.
No one does that.
So that's and I that might be the hardest part of the job. But I was talking to my assistant last week, and you definitely know this because it's the same thing in what you do. One of the hardest parts of the job is all the parts of the job you didn't sign up for. You know?
Yeah.
Like, not only am I... If it was just come exercise, that'd be great. But it's also like, we gotta talk about your feelings. And we gotta talk about your motivation. We gotta talk about... And then when you don't show up for 2 weeks, I have to call you and say, hey, what's going on? Is everything okay? How have you been? And that's all... It's almost like, you know, like there's no manual for having kids. There's like no manual for that part of the job.
There isn't.
You know, and you have to be... But that's also what separates, I think, a good from a great coach. Is can you live in that role too, and be the person, you know, and have those little aha moments, the communication. That's tough. That's tough.
Sure. I don't think this matters.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think it matters. But is there a difference between coaching women and coaching men?
I think women are easier to coach in what I do. There's a couple differences. For sure. Yeah, and people are usually, what? Especially nowadays, everyone's like, oh, we're all equal and this and that.
Yeah.
Like, you can be equal and different. That's okay. And I will give women credit for this all the time and twice on Sundays. Women, when you coach them, so 2 things. 1, women generally care more about their health and being healthy than men do. I don't know why that is, but it's a thing.
It's not a good look.
No.
That's not a good look at all.
That's one thing that makes it easier. The other thing that makes it easier is I don't know if I have an exception to this. It works one way, not the other way. Every woman I've coached wants to know how to do the thing well.
The guys have already assumed that they do it well?
The guys want to do it as hard and as fast as they can. With the most weights. And like, you know, like, it's almost like the girls want to learn how to drive the car, and the guys is like, where's that NOS button? Where's that, where's the turbo? Now, the reason that works one way or another, some guys I work with are very interested in doing it right. But almost every time I meet a guy like that, they have like a story like, oh, I used to lift and I tore my back, or, you know, whatever, right? So now I care. Now that I've had the catastrophic injury, now I want to know how to do it well. Where for whatever reason, man, women, when they come in, are super dialed in on... So then the hard part of coaching a girl is, no, that looks good, add some weight. Like, no, that looks good, go harder. You know, work, push. So that's like the opposite. Where with a dude, the hard part is, hey dude, take some weight off the bar, let's clean up that technique, and then we can add some more weight. So it's like the inverse thing. So.
Do you find that socially, or maybe culturally, aspects of training get overlooked or left out because, put it this way. I have heard women say, I was once doing XYZ activity, and I was competitive, and my family was afraid that I'd become a lesbian. Have you ever heard some shit like that?
Yes.
And I'm like, and the first time I heard that, I was like, what? Like it's a thing that just like...
Oh, dude, there's like a couple hotline things for me on this. Yeah, right, that's part of it. The one thing that the thing that makes me the most like, I guess I get upset about a lot of things, and I'll go on a soapbox for a lot of things. But
all right, bring it.
One thing that always works is if a girl looks athletic and a man says, "Oh, she looks like a dude," and it usually makes me the most upset because usually the guy saying it looks like a pile of shit.
Yeah,
it's not like he's, it's not like this dude is like, Arnold.
Right.
Because one, Arnold would never say that,
Right.
and he'd be like, "Look at the muscles on her, she was amazing." But two, like, it's always some dude who's done nothing and looks like trash.
That is the absolute truth.
But the other thing too is, during my CrossFit time, I actually I judged a lot of their big events. I worked as a referee at the regionals and once at the games, which is their worldwide event.
Yeah.
So two things. One, those girls look way less big in person. And a lot of it is when you see someone on the internet or on TV or whatever, they look a certain kind of way. And then
the right
two,
angle. Yeah.
But then two, like, they look like athletes.
Right.
And I don't know why we're detached from that. I don't know what it is. But like go to Greece and look at the statues. That's what that chick looks like.
Yes.
Yeah. Like, they look like someone who has explored their athletic potential.
Yeah.
And that's awesome. And I think, in my opinion, everyone should want to look that way. It's funny, I don't want to put her on the spot when she's not here. But my assistant, Cody, is a lesbian. And she gets hit on by dudes at the gym sometimes. And she hates it. And we had some talks about how to, like, dude, the best thing was, my two favorite things on that. Once a guy comes up to me and goes, "Hey, is she single, da-da-da?" And I said, "Listen, buddy, you don't have what she wants." And he goes, "You don't know me, man." I said, "I know enough." You don't have what she wants. Or maybe you have too much or something, right?
Yeah.
And then, another guy came up one time and was like, and I've gotten more comfortable with saying this now because I asked her, "Hey, how do you feel about me saying this?" But a guy comes up and goes, "Hey, is she single, da-da-da?" And I said, "Well, no, she's not. She has a girlfriend." And I was like, "Are you okay with me telling people that about you?" And she was like, "Yeah, I don't care, but I didn't want to be, insensitive to it. But she owns it completely, much to her credit. And so this asshole goes, "Well, but is she sure?" And I was like, "Are you sure that you're straight?" And he goes, "Yeah, what do you mean?" I'm like, "Well, then she's probably pretty sure that she's a lesbian. It's not like she just one day was like, looking at the Scantron like,
yeah,
I think it is number B, so that, but one time, she and I were talking about it because she was upset about it. And she said, "I don't get it. Don't I look like a lesbian?" And I said, one, what does that mean to you? Two, why is that important to you? And I said, what you look like is an athletic, pretty girl.
Yeah.
Like, and who cares what your orientation is? You know what I mean? Like, there is no, like, oh, that person looks like a lesbian. Like, that person looks the way they look, Like, it's...
When you just said that, I'm sorry. Like, it made me think of a whole bunch of thoughts just rushed in.
Yeah.
So the first thing I thought was mature me, experienced me, worldly me. Mm-hmm. Was like, she just looks like a regular chick.
Yeah.
Whatever regular means.
Right.
Like, because when I first, and I don't even know how I know, it's just probably catching parts and bits and pieces of conversations, but I'm like, Cody's a lesbian, okay. Not that that means anything, not that it matters, it's just, okay. But when you said that statement, don't I look like a lesbian, and I'm like, now, hearing that, I have thought back, and I'm like, younger, I'm like, Oh,
yeah, and she's only like 20, 21.
There is kind of a look.
Right.
Or maybe not necessarily an actual physical look.
Yeah.
It's more of a a physical way that someone might carry themselves.
Yes, sure.
Yeah.
But you know, what I did when she said that was I pulled up this Instagram of this athlete, Jackie Perez, who I don't know if she still competes in CrossFit, but she did, and competed in weightlifting. And in my opinion, Jackie Perez is a smoke show.
Okay.
I mean, I think she's super hot. And I slid the phone over, and I said, "This is Jackie Perez," and she's scrolling through, and she goes, "Wow, she looks really strong." Da 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 da. And I let her like go through, and she was like, "Why are you showing me this?" Like, she's a lesbian. And Cody was like, "Oh," and I was like, "Yeah, she's like a lesbian." You know, like no, she looks like a strong, confident, attractive woman.
You know, I know a woman. You could say we're Facebook friends. We are Facebook friends. We're also Instagram friends. We met face to face at a tournament, a jiu-jitsu tournament, over 10 years ago. You know, and if you were to see her, she might look like what people generally think a lesbian looks like.
Yeah.
She might look like.
Right.
Now,
whatever the weird social...
Right.
Yeah.
Now, this chick, she's bigger than you.
Okay. Good for her.
Yeah. You know, they have like built like a brick shit house.
I've seen some of these like female black belts.
Yeah,
talking about one of those.
Yeah,
who are they're just built.
She is, and I just recently saw a picture of her on social media with her guy. Yeah. Now number one, I was too afraid to ask if she was a lesbian because she might headlock me. But she's got guns.
Dude, the funny thing too is like in the context of competition, I've never cared.
Right.
But we need to backtrack because I realized we passed one of my favorite hot button issues.
Okay.
I didn't speak on it.
Oh yeah, let's go.
And we need to speak on it, which is how angry it makes me that it's hard to put it into words. It makes me so upset that a family would say, "We're afraid of you becoming a lesbian." Like, so the fuck what? Right. That drives me nuts. It does. Are they less of a person now? Yeah. Are they, and that drives me absolutely insane. And I call dudes out on that all the time, where they're like, "Oh, I don't want people thinking I'm gay," and I say, "Why not? Like I wouldn't care if you were." Yeah. Why? And I think people have that unconscious stigma a lot of times. Oh, I don't want to be thought of as this, and it's like as though that is. Like a murderer. Right. Right. You've done nothing wrong. You know what I mean? There's nothing bad about you. Did you hear? You're a perfectly valid human being.
Joe just murdered 7 people in cold blood. He did? Well, at least he's not gay.
Right, exactly. But that's the way they talk about it. That's the way people talk about it.
They do.
And, it's funny. I let it go under my radar for so long, and I don't remember. It was an embarrassingly recent discovery of mine. Maybe in the last 5 or 6 years. Mm-hmm. I think what it is. So that girl I was talking about, who was that Matt Mills and I lost. Yeah. We worked together and still lost. She's a lesbian. Okay. And she doesn't look like a lesbian, interestingly, right? But she's very, out and proud of it and doesn't have anything, And she came to my wedding and she wore a suit with her long hair and, you wouldn't, you know what I mean? Yeah. And, I remember she and I did a lot of competitions together. And I started to hear these weird little undercurrent things. Because she and I just got along really well. We trained at the same time of day at the same gym. So you start talking. We found out we had the same sense of humor, the same kind of dry, sarcastic sort of wit, and so we just really we really bonded, and we also both loved to compete. Cool. And we're both about it. So whenever something came up that was co-ed, you get a text or I get a text, and one of us would hit each other up like, "Hey, you see this one? Let's go do it." And I think by the time I stopped competing, she and I had done 6 or 7 competitions together. Wow. As a team. And we just always had a blast because we got along really well. And my favorite thing about her was she was always down to rumble. You know, the one thing I couldn't stand, I never played team sports growing up because you watch The Last Dance?
Oh, yeah, on ESPN.
Dude,
I loved that.
Everyone's like, oh, Michael was so mean. I was like, oh my God, I'm him.
Yeah, I didn't think he was mean.
I was that guy on the team.
Yeah.
Like, shut the fuck up, get back on the line.
Yeah.
That was me.
Yeah.
And I didn't get along well with kids because they didn't want me yelling at them.
Yeah.
But, like, I never had to yell at Andrea.
Yeah.
I never, like, if anything, like, it was always like, I need to work hard because she's working hard.
Yeah.
So we were a great team. But I started to hear people say, like, oh, she's really strong. She lesbian? And I was like, and you know, like, right. And, like, things would pick up and I was just like, how much of my life have I let people, like, quietly slip in these little things?
Yeah.
Where you don't realize, like, so what if she is? You know?
Yeah.
Like, why is that? You know, like,
yeah.
No, fuck you.
You know, especially now.
Mm-hmm.
So, alright, you see women, and they come in all shapes and sizes and varieties, you know. That sounds terrible, but I'm going somewhere with it, you know.
Let me finish.
Yeah. There's the petite ones.
Yeah.
There's whatever, you name it, there's a shape or a designation.
Right.
I gotta tell you, there's nothing I find more attractive than an athletic woman.
Sure.
And I've never seen an athletic woman, not never, it is rare to see an athletic woman who is this petite little...
She ain't gonna be Kate Moss.
Right.
Yeah, if they're petite, it's almost like if they're petite, it's worse for them.
Yeah.
Because, like, you look at someone like Serena Williams, and she's still curvy and has a very feminine body, right?
Right.
But if you look at a high-level female, Simone Biles,
yeah.
I mean, her shoulders look better than mine.
Yeah.
She's what we call scap jacked, man. She has that Mount Rushmore back.
Yeah.
She, and I almost got in a fight one time, so we were out somewhere, and I have a friend who grew up as a gymnast, and has that back still.
Yeah.
And I think it's awesome.
It is.
It's incredible, and it's such a... Because a buddy of mine says this all the time. He says, I've never met a weak person with a strong back, is his saying. Mm-hmm. I love that. For so many reasons, right?
Sure. Sure, I like that.
And so we were out, and this girl was wearing a strapless dress, and so you could see her back and all the musculature. And I heard someone say something about it, and I was like, we didn't cover this at all, but growing up I was really angry all the time. Okay. And I've been to like therapy for it. So in that moment I was like, if he says it again louder, I'll have to go fuck him up. But it was, and I thought, this poor, and she's beautiful. And I just thought, this poor girl has gone through how much of her life with like walk anywhere, and you know she's wearing that dress because it makes her feel good, and she's confident, and she's happy, and you have to hear these little assholes who've never done anything important with their lives. Never. No. Because, and here's another thing. I've never met a dude who trains who says any of that shit. Sure. Not someone who trains seriously. Right. Like, maybe some blue belts, but they aren't real people. Yeah. Not yet. Not yet. You know, so and I felt such a sympathy for her. Yeah. That, because she and I got to know each other pretty well, and she also loved to lift weights. And I was like, man, this girl just is doing what she loves, and her body represents that, and she has to go through all this bullshit. I do the same things because I love them, and when I walk anywhere, people are like, this dude he's so jacked, look at him, he looks amazing, you know? And it's like, that's not fair. Right. That's not fair, because she worked as hard or harder than me, and those are her trophies too.
Yeah.
And if you can't respect that, like that's messed up.
It is. You know.
My wife's the opposite. My wife, so when we met, she was a strength and conditioning coach for a collegiate rowing team.
Okay.
And that's not how we met, but it was definitely like a really good icebreaker to get things going. And she, when she was in college, was a collegiate rower.
I remember you telling me
Division II. And when we started dating, I mean, she had the back, the shoulders, huge quads, like really defined legs. And at least once a week now, she moans and groans, I miss my muscular legs and my muscular back. But it's just, you know, she's got a job now. She works hard. She still trains like 3-4 days a week. But, I mean, there was a time period where she was doing like, she was rock climbing. And she could knock out like, I think like 12 or 15 pull-ups. And she had the back again. And she hasn't been doing that lately. So, but it's funny because she's the opposite. She looks in the mirror and she's like, I miss my muscles. Where'd they go?
Yeah.
And I'm like, I love that about you. That's great.
Yeah. It's, when Missy started weight training, and she, you know, she wanted to get stronger for competitive jiu-jitsu.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I think she just does it because she enjoys it.
Sure.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure that's why.
It's a great drug, man.
Yeah, I think she just does it because she enjoys it, and I think there might even be a therapeutic element. Maybe it's a little cathartic or something for her, you know, because like she just kind of goes into her zone.
Oh, dude, putting your headphones on, hitting the weights, it's great. It's like going surfing.
Yeah, you know, so I've done a little in my day. You know, I usually will do it whenever I'm like, you know what, I don't feel strong. Time to go back to it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, I've never had an issue with it. I just have never made it a complete part of my lifestyle.
Okay.
But with her, one day we were talking about something, and she asked me, she's like, if I was, how did she say? Did she ask me if I was okay with it, or did it bother me that she's so into it? And I was like, then I'm thinking to myself, fuck no. But I didn't say that. I was just like, nah, I think it's great. Because I do. I think it's awesome, you know? And I know for some people that, like, they use it as a way of, I've heard this said that they use it to strengthen their mind.
Sure. Yeah.
So I'm like, rock out, enjoy every bit of it. It's just, you know.
You know, it's funny, and this is I think it's a funny story on a couple counts. But my wife once said, you know, I think we were eating dinner at home or something. And the fact that I'm alive to tell this story is really cool. Because what she said was, if I got fat, would you still love me? And like an idiot, I responded immediately with, well, it depends. And like no bullet wound, nothing. These scars are all from other things. But she immediately, you know, you saw her face change, and I was like, let me explain.
Yeah.
And I said, if you got fat because you like gave up on trying to be healthy, and all of a sudden you don't want to do anything active, and you don't want to take care of yourself, and no longer care about yourself, that might change things for me. Because I don't know if I can be with someone who doesn't want to further themselves. There was a girl I was dating who we were going on really well, and that was why I couldn't date her anymore. Because she just had no ambition for her life and didn't want to take care of her health. So I was like, if you have a condition, we're there together.
Right.
If you get fat because you're stressed out at work and things are not going well, whatever. Right? But if you throw in the towel and you're like, well, I don't really care about this anymore, and who cares if I'm fat, and I don't care about my health, like, that could eventually lead to some real problems in a relationship.
I get that.
Because I need you to care about being healthy. I need you to care about you.
Right on. And
about your life, you know? So luckily I didn't get stabbed. Even though I could have and maybe would have deserved it. And I think it's more to Missy's point, right? Like I think it's more important for women, especially now. because I think it's such a vital thing and I wish there was some way to like psychically implant this in people's brains. I think it's so important for women to be strong and feel strong. I remember we had this purple belt come by the gym who from out of town. I think she was from Georgia visiting. And she and I rolled, and I put my hands on her, and I just felt how strong she was. We're standing up. And first of all, her randori was like, I mean, she had done some judo. And I was like, oh shit, like I need to be on my game for this.
Yeah.
And all I thought was like, this is awesome. Like this chick has trained. And we talked afterwards, and she was military and this and that. And so I mean, like she's using it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like but I thought, dude, like, in the, and this might be, I'm not a woman. I can't really speak to this. And what's worse, I'm a white male. So I really maybe can't speak to this. But in my opinion, one of the, in like the Me Too era, one of the best things you can do as a woman is get strong, get in shape, learn martial arts, learn how to use a gun.
Sure.
And at least take some of that power back.
Absolutely.
Because it's such a tragic time. I mean, not that it's the most tragic time.
Right.
Donald Glover, Childish Gambino,
Yep.
does a stand-up bit where he says,
boy.
like, these aren't the worst times. He goes, there was a time where if you were out and the lights were out, you just died. He's like, what happened to Tim? Oh, the sun went down and he got raped and murdered. Like that's so it's not the worst time. But these are, it's in my opinion, it's unacceptable that it still happens.
Yeah.
And I have this debate a lot with folks, and it's funny because, maybe it's this Connecticut, because of the way gun legislatures talked about here. But we had some friends over the other night, and this one of our friends was asking me, she lives alone with her roommate, they're both women, and she was like, can you show me a move that, like, and I was like, get a gun. But can you show me? I can, but get a gun. Get a shotgun, keep it in your room, and like that solves the problem. And she said, well, I don't want to kill anybody. I was like, you don't have to. That's what the great thing about a shotgun is. Because 99 times out of 100, whoever's coming in your house, they are now unmatched, like
Yeah. Yeah.
They didn't bring that to the party.
No.
And we talked for a while about it, and then before she left, she was like, I think I'm going to get a gun. And I was like, good.
Yeah.
Right? Take some of that power back. Take that ability to say, I'm not going to let someone,
Yeah. It's weird because in my inner circle, most of the women that I associate with are strong women.
Yeah.
So when I meet women, I've heard women say, I would just curl up in a ball and just, and I heard that and I was like, what? And not even trying to shame her. I'm thinking, are you nuts? Is what I'm thinking. I'm like, no way is that, that's a terrible idea. You mentioned something also, a few seconds back when the purple belt woman came through, and something you said reminded me of something. In my history, I have dated women who did not train, and I've dated, Missy trains.
Right.
And I've rolled and I've boxed with women, I've kickboxed with women, I've done jiu-jitsu with women. It's a weird thing when no matter how you're touching a woman's body, but we'll say in a training context, when a woman has never trained, and she has trained. I can remember I've grabbed, I'm like, whoa, you might get hurt. You know what I mean? Like, this, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Whereas, I'm used to being around, my daughter, she trains. Missy, Jess, where it's like, you know what I mean? We're going and we're doing stuff.
Right.
And it's a weird feeling.
Yeah.
It's very strange.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And, I don't know, I mean, the other funny thing, and again, this is, I want to couch this because someone will listen to this and
right.
I'll get crucified for it. I was out with some friends one night, and we were talking about this same thing about I think people should put their safety in their own hands.
Yeah.
And one of the girls we were out, I think my wife hates that I have these conversations because she always is like sort of quiet in the corner, and I try to talk to her afterwards. This is what I meant. But this woman we were out with said, "Well, you don't know what it's like. You're a man. You never have to think about your safety." And I thought, for a lot of dudes, that's probably true. But as someone who spent 26 years doing martial arts, it's all I think about.
Yeah.
And I don't, and she went in this whole thing. You don't know what it's like to walk to your car with your keys in your hand, this and that. And I was like, yes, I do. Like, I walk to my car with a shopping cart. I don't carry the bags. Because now I have both hands ready to whoop your ass. I bring the shopping cart to my car, unload the bags, and the whole time I'm doing it, believe it or not, I'm looking in the window, I'm scoping around, because I've had people come up, hey man, you got any money?
Yeah.
I don't know you, buddy.
Yeah.
Your hand's going towards the knife a little bit.
Yeah.
And then when I'm done putting everything away, I close the car, I lock the car,
Yep.
and I don't care what neighborhood I'm in. I'm at West Hartford Whole Foods, this is how I do it.
Yeah.
And then I walk the shopping cart back.
Yeah.
And then I walk back to my car, and every time I think to myself, this is good, because at any point, like, fuck the groceries. I'll let that go. I need these ready to go, And it was a neat moment to say, like, and I said, I'm not trying to be unsympathetic. I know it's worse for you. But don't think, I tried to explain, like, this is something you can learn.
Yeah.
And you can work on. You can learn self-defense. You can work on situational awareness. You can develop a skill set that makes... Nothing's going to make the world safe. But you can make yourself a hard target.
Sure. Sure.
And that's valuable.
I was talking to a friend the other day. We were doing some manual labor. And he had said, maybe you should have considered getting this ethnic group to help, Get some of these guys. And
Eskimos, right?
Yeah. And so, afterwards we're talking, I go, they do work hard, I'm not okay with anyone working harder than me.
Right.
Ever. I'm okay with someone being better than me. I'm not okay with someone working harder than me.
Yes.
You know what I mean? Like, there's a line there. You're better, you're better. There's nothing I can do about that. I do have some control over you working harder than
right.
me.
My grandmother has, I think, 2 lemon trees, a tangerine tree, and 2 orange trees, I think, in her backyard. Mm-hmm. She has a lot of fruit trees. Her dad was a farmer, so she's very about that life. And she's 82, 83 now. But when this happened, she was probably in her mid to late 70s. And I was out in California with her. And I had plans that day. And she said, oh, the fruit needs to get picked. I'm going to go to Home Depot and pick up people of a certain ethnic group. And they'll come and pick it. And for a couple, I was like, I don't want you here alone, people you don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I said, look, I'll move my plans. I was kind of like cousins. My whole family's in California, so I'll see them later. Yeah. I'll reschedule. Let me pick the fruit. And she was like, okay. And I did it. And to your point, I finished it, and she goes, well, you got it all. You did a good job. It would have taken them half the time. Yeah. I know. But you did it, Yeah. And I was like, I'll take that. Yeah. I'm fine with that. I got it done. I did it, Yeah. I'm sure they'd be better at me.
Yeah. So, what's the most enjoyable part of your job?
There's a lot about my job I really like. The only thing I don't like is waking up at 5 a.m. Mm-hmm. And I only don't like that for like half an hour.
Right. I get that. I get that.
I think, man, Because I might have a new answer for this. And this is going to be sappy and weird. I think the most enjoyable part of my job has been training Cody. It's been really cool. Teaching another coach how to coach.
Sure.
Has been tremendously rewarding and cool, and it's made me a better coach, and it's amplified my idea. It's really shown me who I am in a lot of ways, and I feel it's super gratifying.
If I may.
Yeah.
A friend of mine, Paul, he once told me to teach something or to teach someone is to learn it twice.
Yeah, I've heard that.
And maybe that's what it is.
Maybe.
You know?
If I had to pick a second thing, because that's kind of like a newer thing, the best part of the job is definitely, like, the most enjoyable thing isn't getting thanked, isn't getting the acknowledgement from this, but from seeing, because even if they don't recognize that it happened, seeing someone do something that they previously believed they could not do. Yeah. I've coached tons of people to their first pull-up, to a double bodyweight back squat, people who walked into the gym afraid of weights. Sure. Or, oh, I'll never get a pull-up. I'm excuses 1 through 20, right? And I don't ever fight with them. Right. I don't say, well, why don't we train today and see what happens? And we take it one day at a time, right? But I've seen the coolest thing for me, whether they recognize it or not, because I've seen folks do it and not realize, and occasionally I'll call them out on it. But when someone comes in and does something that defies their previous expectation, understanding of themselves. Okay. I don't want anything else in life, man. That's the coolest thing in the world.
That's awesome.
Yeah, that's really neat.
Do you ever... Because to someone who doesn't really know, to someone who isn't in it, there's you, and at the risk of isolating and degrading, and I don't mean to degrade anyone, there's you and there's personal trainers. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of distance.
This is actually a topic that's a huge discussion topic in my industry. Okay. Because there are some people who I think are wrong who don't differentiate. Mm. And then there are some people who I think are also wrong who say, oh, well, but we are over here and they are down here. And what I tell people is, to some people, I am a personal trainer. Right. And then to some people, I'm a coach. Yes. And it sort of depends on how much you invest in yourself, how much I invest in you, how much you invest in me. Right. And I actually, and I don't think personal trainer is a bad word. I have a client I work with who I see multiple times a week, who I think to that person, I'm more of a personal trainer than a coach. And we get along great. Yeah. And I think to a lot of my private clients, my one-on-one clients, I'm more of a personal trainer than a coach. Okay. And I think really my group classes, they see me more as a coach. And obviously the athletes I train see me more as a coach, or those with athletic aspirations. But I also have some people to whom I was a personal trainer and am now a coach. And then I don't have the right term for this, but I have some people I work with where I'm more than a coach. Sure. There's people I've been working with for, I think, 7 or 8 years now. Wow. And to those people, it's taken on something different. Sure. Because when you see that person 4 or 5 times a week, and they come in, you can, hey, what's up? My boyfriend left me. Do you want to talk about it? Do you mind? Nope. Yeah. And that's not in either job description. Right. And that usually is just listening, just being someone to listen. But the other thing, now the place where I will say something really interesting here, there's a guy, Eric Cressy, who's like the dude
in
strength and conditioning for baseball. And Eric Cressy has this great thing he says where in almost no other job in the world is the barrier of entry lower than for that of a coach / personal trainer. Because you can go and get your certification, and start coaching.
Yeah.
And he said, this is a great blessing. Because in a place with a low barrier of entry, there's a huge space to distinguish yourself.
Right on.
Right? And that's the mentality I take. So even if you think I'm a personal trainer, you're not going to talk about me the way you talk about,
right?
A guy in a polo shirt at LA Fitness.
I was just
right? You're not going to talk about me the way you talk about, some dude at Gold's Gym.
Right.
Right? Because, like we talked about before the podcast started, I teach people to appreciate quality.
Yeah.
And I make some of them snobs.
Yeah.
So whether you see me as a coach or a personal trainer, the real thing for me is for you to understand the quality difference.
Yeah.
And this is actually a cool place to go to with this. If anyone is listening to this who is a coach, I went to a really neat seminar on coaching and on business a couple of years ago. God, it's probably a million years ago now. But it was really, really great. And the guy running the seminar was a guy named Ben Bergeron, who's really big in the CrossFit scene. Mm-hmm. And homeboy has like 3 or 4 gyms that are packed. Like we're talking like 600 members. He makes money hand over fist. People fight to work under him. I mean, he's and the worst part about it, man, he's the nicest dude. Like I met him, he was a great guy, and I was like, can't you just be an asshole so I can hate you?
Right.
Why do you have to be a nice dude? But he taught me this really cool thing. He went on the whiteboard at the seminar and he put numbers 1 through 5, and he said, we are all coaches. So you are a coach, level 1 through 5, to every person you meet. And I taught this to Cody like last week, so it's fresh in my head. A level 1 coach is that LA Fitness schmuck, right? Or your McDojo guy, right?
Yeah.
So a level 1 coach, they only if you treat someone as a level 1 coach, you only respect them because like it's a transactional thing.
Sure.
I am at this gym, I am paying money, so this is my coach and therefore I must listen to them. So that is the lowest level of buy-in, the lowest level of interaction, right?
Sure.
You are at ground zero, right? A level 2 coach is one step up. And when you're a level 2 coach, it means someone believes you can help somebody achieve something, right? And now there's a couple different ways to become a level 2 coach. Maybe, so I told Cody this, I said, when they come to Underdog MMA, a lot of people already see us as level 2 coaches. Because most people who come to our gym come there by referral.
Sure.
So someone has said, hey, the coaches here are legit, right? So for most people, we're lucky. For a lot of folks who walk through the door, we're already at level 2.
Okay.
Because they know we've helped someone do something.
Right on.
Level 3 is really cool. Level 3 is that person can help. I always have 3 or 4, I get confused, but they'll both be cool. So level 3 is that person can help me do something. That usually comes through either you've got a really good recommendation, right? Like this person helped my cousin lose a bunch of weight and get in shape. So I know this guy, I've seen them work.
Yeah.
I've seen the end result and I've watched the progress, so now I believe this guy can do it. Now I'm here. And those people, when they walk in the door, they're like, oh, this is really cool. I'm working with this coach. This is great, right? Or it could be they've been training in the gym a while and they've seen one of your students do really well. And so they believe, okay, this guy can get people to the dance or whatever.
Yeah.
Level 4 coach is, level 3 could mean that they've had some sort of interaction with you and they've seen some results, right?
Okay.
Level 4 is really cool. Level 4 is, I believe this coach can help anyone do anything.
Ah.
Right? And so that's, like, you're almost top tier.
Okay.
And that means that usually, your reputation precedes you.
Yeah.
Right? People are seeking you out and your time is highly valued and your instruction is highly valued. And people either are you build people to that relationship level through years of work or by your years of work, building a reputation for yourself.
Sure.
Level 5 coaches are Dan and Inosanto, right? They're few and far between. Bill Belichick, right? Exactly. And everyone listening to the podcast is going, oh yeah,
Yeah.
So that means you've done it, man.
Yeah.
You've coached the Patriots to however many Super Bowls,
Right.
right? So that's the one above all, right? But I love that system. And what I was talking to Cody about, which I thought was, and she was like, you could see the light bulbs turning on, was when you interact with any client, anybody, ask yourself, where do I think this person sees me on that spectrum? And then test that. If you tell them something, how do they respond? How do they interact back with you? If you have a conversation with them, are they questioning what you're telling them? Or are they trying to find out, am I doing it right?
Sure.
Right. If they're questioning it, then you're a level 1 or level 2.
Right.
If they are saying, "Hey, I'm doing it. Is it right?" You're a level 3 or level 4.
That's really good.
Yeah.
On a side note, I've watched her work with some of the people there at the gym, and I hear you. You know what I mean? Like when she's like designating like what the workout's going to be or what's going on when she's talking to someone. I hear you.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I hear you.
Right. It's really cool.
Yeah, it is. So I think she's got a future.
I mean, I'm going out of town this weekend coming up, and it's like I don't have to worry about anything.
Yeah.
Like I'm leaving someone who's going to answer questions the way I would answer questions.
Yeah.
So it's not a worry.
That's very cool.
Yeah.
For me, when we were talking earlier downstairs, I was saying we both were. I can't hang out with you if you don't have a code.
Yeah.
A step beyond that, I can't. I'm probably going to have a hard time learning from you if you don't have a code.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, can I separate the two? I can. But it's not going to be the greatest experience, And then the next thing is, if I want to go and train with someone, whatever it is, if it's learning how to play tennis, if it's weight training, if it was preparing for a marathon, I always feel confident training with somebody who I know is still a student, who is still doing research.
Yeah.
If you know what I mean? So if I'm talking to somebody and like, I can work with you on this and this, and it's like, hey, what's that book? Oh, I just picked this book up. There's this guy, he's on the cutting edge of this. And you're reading about him? Yeah. Oh, okay. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
That really inspires me with confidence, knowing that the person who is educating me, coaching me, leading me is still a student.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't remember, and that's why I'm going out of town next weekend, is to go to a seminar. I don't remember if it was you who told me this story. I don't think it was you, but it was something that I thought was so cool, and it was about Inosanto, and it was that oh no, you know what? I think it was one of Burton's little like video log things, something like that on the internet. But someone was saying that they went with Dan to a seminar. On something that Dan is a master in. Like I think it went to like an Eskrima seminar or something like that.
Yeah.
And they went, and whoever, I think it was Burton, went with him, and was like, why are you here? And so they go to the seminar, and the seminar is like good, but like he's like, I already knew it, so I knew Dan already knew it,
Yeah.
And they're driving back, and he goes, he couldn't take it anymore, and he goes like, why did you go to that? And he goes, what do you mean? And he goes, well, you already knew everything that guy was teaching. And he said, yeah, but I didn't know the way he was going to teach it.
Yeah.
And I was like, dude, that's really cool.
Yeah.
Because that's it, man.
Yeah.
Like, and what I found over the years is I like to keep my training as simple as possible. And I'll teach you how to step onto a box I'll teach the same movement 30 different ways.
Sure.
And way numbers 1 through 29 won't work for that person, but then finally way number 30 does.
Right.
And my life is a quest to find more ways and to weed out the worst ones and try to find the ones that are the best.
Sure.
And I was training a guy I've been training this kid on and off for like 10 years. And we were doing the step up a couple weeks ago. And I was talking to a buddy of mine who's a DPT, he's a physical therapist, and we were talking about a different way to view the step up.
Okay.
And so I taught it that way. And this guy who I've taught for 10 years goes, that was the best way I've ever taught that.
That's awesome.
You know?
That's awesome.
And the same DPT, we were having this long talk. We talked about the shoulder and the way it articulates in movement. And so I was teaching the Turkish get-up.
Okay.
And I've always taught it terribly, and I never realized that. I focused always on just getting the order right and the movements right and making everything look good and da-da-da. And I was talking to this guy, Dr. Kyle, and he goes, have you ever thought about the fact that the Turkish get-up, like he outlined it in this way, like what you're really doing is you're supporting an object on the shoulder girdle.
Okay.
Because I had always learned the Turkish get-up as a total body movement, and he was like, no, it's a shoulder movement. And your body has to articulate with the shoulder in a variety of different positions while the weight is imposing on it. And so as you move, the shoulder starts, because you're on your back. So the shoulder starts at this angle, right? And then as you come up, it's at this angle. And now it's here. And now it's here, right? And as you're moving through the get-up, the shoulder has to stay constantly active the whole time as the position changes. Damn. And yeah, this guy's blowing my mind apart. And he was like, so that's the get-up. And then he goes, and then the warm-up you like to do in jiu-jitsu with your hand on the ground and you walk around your hand.
Yep.
He goes, that's the opposite.
Huh.
Because that's body around object. This is object around body.
Yeah.
And so I was like, dude, that's the coolest way anyone's ever taught this. So we had the Turkish get-up. Like, it just so happened, I had it in my notes to do it like 2 cycles later. So when we did it, I taught it the way that guy was talking about it. And everyone was perfect.
Wow.
People who had been screwing it up for years were nailing it.
Yeah. And
I was like, and I've taught that movement my whole career.
Sure.
But by having that different context, the different way of relating to it, and understanding, like, dude, that was such a big puzzle piece for me. And he said in his practice, as a physical therapist, everything you do with your body is either object to body or body to object.
Okay.
And what he sees that's really interesting is clinically, he'll have people who are very, very strong body to object and are useless the other way around, or vice versa.
Right.
And they, like, their body hasn't learned how to activate in a certain way. And we were talking about it because we went down a big rabbit hole in the context of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. Because at a certain point, as a grappler, you have to become an expert at, I think it's object to body. Because you're always having to base on the floor and find support.
Sure.
So, and he's just recently gotten into Jiu-Jitsu.
Cool.
So we were talking about, isn't it neat how you have to have that skill set? And so, I realized how important it was for me to build in both of those connections for the athletes I work with. Because if you're a martial artist, it's vital to have those support systems built in and dialed in. If you're not a martial artist, it's still pretty important.
Sure.
You're not going to maybe be as susceptible to injury without it, but it's still really important.
Right.
That's what's funny is I get a lot of folks who come by the gym because I do personal training and group training, and I get folks who say, like, well, give me your elevator pitch or whatever, and I say, this training is designed to make you a more adept martial artist and allow you to, perform better on the mats and this and that. And someone says, like, well, I don't really want to do martial arts. And I'll pull up a picture of a UFC fighter and be like, do you want to look like that? And they go, yeah. I'm like, good, then we're in the same boat. Yeah. This will work for you too.
Yeah. Is one, not to say easier, but for lack of a better word at this moment, is it easier to do the one-on-one or the small group?
Ooh.
And then I have a second question to go right with that.
I think I enjoy the group training more.
Okay.
But I think for me, this was not always the case. Right now, one-on-one's easier.
Okay.
When I first started out, one-on-one was way harder. For a variety of reasons. I couldn't do this podcast when I started out. I didn't know how to talk to people.
Mm-hmm.
I was a pretty quiet dude. I just kept to myself a lot. I wasn't a big conversationalist. So I had to learn how to do that. I went part of the job that wasn't part of the job. I had to know how to talk to people. It's crazy to see where I've gone, right? It used to be when I did a one-on-one session, I had to write someone's program out like a month in advance for however many days I thought they'd show up. And I had to make sure that I was satisfying their needs, but also making sure it was good and this and that. Dude, somewhere around year 8,
mm-hmm.
I started writing when they walked in the door.
Wow.
And I still do that. And it's, once you have the skill level to do it, it's way better. Mm-hmm. Because otherwise, you try to mold them to the plan. Where when they come in sometimes, and one, maybe the plan's shitty. That's option number 1. Option number 2, and if you look at my notebook with a client, they all have their own little notebooks.
Mm-hmm.
Like any given day, there's stuff scratched out that I wrote 2 minutes ago.
Yeah.
Because you know what? I slept kind of funny last night, and my shoulder kind of hurts. Oh, that's out. You know, yeah. Or I went for a run yesterday, and my groin. All right, that's out, right? So now that I have the skill. Mm-hmm. To do it on the fly like that, one-on-ones are way easier. I can get more done in the hour. Initially, the group classes were easier for a couple of reasons. One, you were fitting everyone into the program. They were okay with that. And you said to modify little things for them here and there.
Okay.
You're doing less in a group session. Always.
Sure.
You're always doing less. And then 3, perhaps the biggest thing, as a coach, you can kind of hide a little bit.
Right on.
Because, 1, you don't need to motivate them as much because they're all there together and they're all going on the adventure together.
They motivate each other.
If you look at my favorite little metaphor for it is when Gandalf tries to get Bilbo to go on the Hobbit.
Yeah.
He has to trick him.
Yeah.
That's one person. In Lord of the Rings, we got the Fellowship. I'll go.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. That's awesome.
And my sword and my axe. And okay.
Yeah.
All these dudes are coming. Let's go. So initially, that was the way it was. You had a follow-up question though.
Yeah. For the athlete or athletes, do they benefit? Could they benefit from both? Do they benefit from both? And is it maybe you take one person, he's done solo training, but now it's maybe for his growth, you should transition him into small group, and vice versa?
Great question. I think it's you could be an athlete and be in group training the whole time and be fine. Mm-hmm. I think some people eventually need to transfer to one-on-one, but those are your professional fighters, mm-hmm. usually, or people who've put a lot of time in,
okay,
or have very specialized needs, or in some cases the wear and tear is so tremendous that they need attention.
Yeah,
that too.
Yeah.
But let me talk about why the group training is beneficial.
Okay.
It gets rid of a lot of bullshit.
Mm-hmm.
I love it. I love starting them in the group training. Because I always have like 1 or 2 cats who don't care about jiu-jitsu or don't care about striking. And they're here to crush workouts. Mm-hmm. And they're here to go hard on the conditioning piece of the day. And nothing is better. Because if you're a martial artist, you're an individual sport competitive athlete. Mm-hmm. And that means you're competitive. You can hide in a team.
Yeah.
I just want to be the best person on the fourth oar that I can be on this boat, and we'll pull across the finish line together, right?
Yeah.
Or in soccer, play defense. You don't want to be if you're not competitive, you're on a forward. And if you're not tough, you're not a midfielder.
Right.
And if you're not a savage, you're not a goalie. Goalies are savages.
Sure.
So you can hide. There's spots to hide. Not to say that defense is an easy position, but different personalities play different spots.
Mm-hmm.
If you're going to be someone who gets in a cage and fights, or goes on the mats and rumbles on the mats with other, grapplers,
mm-hmm.
or gets in a ring, right? You have to have some innate desire of, I'm going to beat the crap out of this person. Or whatever your version of that is.
Sure.
Or at least I want to win, right? So what I love to do is, I'll do some little insidious shit. I'll go up and I'll say, hey, so-and-so is using the 20-pound dumbbells for this movement. Uh-huh. You're using the 10s. Yeah. That's funny, because they work in an office, and you want to get in a cage and fight people. Are you okay with them being stronger than you? And they work in the cage? So that's really good.
Yeah.
And with some of them, I don't need to say anything. I see them looking across the room,
yeah.
And I see they saw Bobby pick up the 50s, and they're like, all right, 55, But then for other folks, the other really good thing is I have these guys, to put it in jiu-jitsu terms, I have my brown belts and my black belts. Yeah. And this is a very different way that I coach than a lot of people.
Okay.
I don't mind them going around helping people out. And the funny thing is, in the strength coach world, that's considered heresy. You have to have control of the room. How dare you let your athletes coach anybody? But I'm from a martial arts background.
Right.
Where the goal is to make as many black belts as you can.
Right.
So that we can create the community of instruction.
I agree.
Now, I'm the sensei, right? Like, I'm the head dude, and what I say goes. But you should also know all of these takedowns and all of these guard passes. And there's no reason, if I'm over here working with this person, you can't go over and say, hey, you're doing that knee cut wrong.
Yeah.
Right? So I one of the best things for me is having the group class where I know, oh, good, I got 2 black belts today. So they can pitch hit if we have, and the most terrifying thing is a class full of 12 white belts on a day we're doing something complicated. And I have to change the curriculum,
Right, on the fly.
Yeah.
On the fly.
So, in a lot of ways, they benefit just like an MMA fighter who maybe only gets to be a purple belt because they don't need to be a black belt. They're going to benefit a lot from having other black belts on the mats.
Yeah.
So the people benefit from that in the same way.
Sure. Yeah. Sure. How about with regards to the different athletes? So, is it you've got coachable athletes and you've got non-coachable athletes, or is it like, say, football players?
Yeah. Oh, they're the best.
Resonate. The training that you put together resonates with them, but with, say, ballerinas, it doesn't.
Sure. That's a good question. We'll do a couple answers here. Okay. So I separate people into 4 different categories. Okay. So there's non-coachable athletes.
We know about that.
Yep. Yeah. Coachable athletes. Yep. Non-coachable NARPs, and then coachable NARPs. And you know what a NARP is. But for the sake of the podcast, NARPs are non-athletic regular people. Right? Which is, I picked that up at Trinity. That's what the athletes at Trinity called the non-athletes when I was coaching there. Or as I was coaching the rowing team one time, and they wanted like a change of pace. Mm-hmm. So we did some agility drills. And a lot of high-level rowers find rowing in college. Because if you're a good athlete, you can be a good rower. You can learn the technique, and as long as you can function well on a team and you have a good athletic base, you can do really well. So I happened to have this crew of girls, and half of them were soccer players and half of them were not. And they were all rowers now. And the soccer players smoked the non-soccer players. And the funny thing was, the girls who weren't soccer players had rowed their whole lives. And one of the girls was like really upset they had lost the agility drill. And one of the soccer players goes, It's not our fault we played real sports growing up. I was like, oh, no. And rowing is a real sport.
Yeah.
But that was really funny.
That is
So, the worst person is the non-coachable athlete. Mm-hmm. The sport they come from makes a difference, only because, generally speaking, people from a football background have been in the weight room more.
Right.
And they can very easily, or they come from something like basketball, where you see, this is one of the good things about social media, where you see LeBron in the weight room. You see Chris Paul in the weight room.
Sure.
So they at least have the correlation, where someone maybe like a ballerina would be like, why are we doing this?
Right.
What's the point? Right? And I have to say, if you want to have feet and knees that work in 10 years, that's why we're doing this.
Yeah.
We're trying to keep your legs alive, so you don't end up hobbled. I've actually worked with some ballerinas, and they end up all messed up.
There's a documentary about the dance community called They Shoot Horses, Don't They? And, like, the abuse that they receive and the abuse that they put themselves through
is terrifying.
Oh, it's horrible.
But, the non-coachable athlete is usually my least favorite person to work with. Because they're assholes, man.
Yeah. Because
they should know better. You know?
Yeah.
That's the thing.
Yeah.
And it's almost like a willful ignorance. Mm-hmm. The non-coachable non-athlete, at least they don't know.
Right.
You know?
Right.
So let's look at both those groups. The non-coachable athlete's generally a jackass. Mm-hmm. And they're just being stubborn and don't want to be helped. And it's like, why are you here? The non-coachable non-athlete is usually someone who's scared or frustrated or nervous. And that's the impediment keeping them from being coachable.
Okay.
And I don't mind those folks at all. Because usually with that, or, my friend does it this way and they squat 300 pounds and, right? So that's the non-coachable non-athlete usually.
Right.
And they're actually not bad at all. Because once you build that connection and that trust to communication, and you can really get into, hey, I want to help you. I wouldn't be doing this job if I didn't want to help you.
Right.
I would go be making way more money using my degree or doing anything else than being in this warehouse with no air conditioning in July. I chose to be here because I want to help you.
Right.
Right? And I've gotten pretty good at winning people over for that. And then they become really coachable.
Awesome.
And what I try to do is, the trick for them is, if you can get them a little win here and there and really celebrate it, that helps a big way.
Okay.
Right? So they do a squat perfectly for the first time, and you make a big deal out of it. Sally, that was amazing. That was really good. That's the best one you've ever done.
Yeah.
You're really catching on to this. Because now the confidence builds, and now the fear goes away. Right? Or when I get really lucky, I'll have someone who's not very coachable and not very athletic, and they will, you can't lie to them, but occasionally they will legitimately do something really well. Maybe they just have a really strong bicep curl. Who cares?
Right.
And then you can go over them and say, and this is my favorite line, wow, you're really natural at that. Because it changes the way they view themselves. Right?
Okay.
People who are non-coachable, non-athletes are kind of like the way I was when I started out. Because I went to a nutritionist, and they told me to eat the same way I'm eating now. And I just wasn't coachable. Because I thought, no, that won't work for me. But it was because I'd been fat for so long, and I had just built into my brain, I can't be in shape. I can't not be fat.
Right on.
Right? So once you can break down that mental barrier and win a little bit of trust and have that conversation. I had a client the other day come in who is beginning to display the signs of being uncoachable. We just started a diet plan, diet protocol. And I knew we were going to have a talk sooner versus later, because when she asked me to do it with her, she said, I've done these before, I always fail. And that to me is the first sign you're going to be tough to coach. So I was like, let's talk, right? So we had this talk, and it was long, it was like half an hour. Which for that kind of thing is long. I know we've been talking for like ever right now, but
right.
This was a long for that. And we had this cool moment where we built some trust.
Okay.
Because I said, what are you afraid of? I didn't skirt around it, right? We went, because I know if you're uncoachable and you're a regular person, you're afraid.
Right.
And we need to find out what that fear is. Because fear is just a path to the dark side, man. We got to get... and she said, 4th of July is coming up. My family does a barbecue every year. I don't want to be the person not enjoying the barbecue. And I said, I have an easy solution to this. You're going to go enjoy the barbecue. And I don't care what you eat or drink. And we'll still lose the weight you want to lose. And she said, how? And I said, you got kids? She said, yeah, I got 2 kids. And I said, all right, if you guys are driving to Florida, right, one of the kids probably has to go to the bathroom, huh? Like a lot. And she goes, yep. And I said, so you pull off the detour, take the side of the road, you know, take an exit. Maybe the exit's 15 minutes, maybe it's 30 minutes.
Okay.
But then you get back on the road and keep going to Florida. You don't drive home.
It's true.
And I was like, the 4th of July party, that's an exit off the highway. And we'll go, we'll get some food, we'll go to the bathroom, and then we get back on the highway. And you and me are going to Florida. Like, we're not going home.
Boom.
We're going to Florida. And it might take a little longer than we want it to, because someone's got to go to the bathroom a couple more times, but we're going to get there.
That's awesome.
And you saw her perspective shift.
That's
right?
Awesome.
And in that moment, she knew I wasn't going to be, because what I think, I'm not a psychiatrist, but I think what her real fear was, I was going to be like, you went off the diet, what's wrong with you? And once she knew I was willing to be there with her and be a human being,
yeah,
and work with her on a human level, she was like, oh, word?
That
okay.
is awesome.
You know? And then the other 2 groups, right, the coachable athletes, who are angels. They're the best. And then the coachable non-athletes, who are also fantastic. And the coachable non-athletes are amazing because they usually don't have a really high, like, they're kind of just here to, I want to be healthy. I want to play with my kids when I'm older.
Right.
You know, so there's no pressure for them, no pressure for me. They listen, they do what I say. It's great. They're awesome.
Yeah.
There is one other, no, dude, this is another friggin' uncoachable I run into this thing with the uncoachable athletes a lot, where, and it boggles my mind sometimes, because the only thing I can think, and when I call them out on it, they get really uncomfortable, because they don't think that I'm right, but I can't figure out anything else, which is where I'll tell them, I run into this thing a lot, and again, I always believe the source is fear. People who train too much.
Okay.
And they get hurt, or they train too much, and they're not getting a lot out of their training, because they're doing 2 or 3 hours of conditioning,
right,
and then they go to do jiu-jitsu and they're smoked.
Right.
Or, conversely, they do an hour of sparring, and then an hour of bag work, and then and they take Russell's class, and then they come to my class, and they've been at the gym for 4 hours. So you're not getting, like, these squats are useless.
Yeah.
Like, go home.
Yeah.
You know? So I run into that problem a lot. And, you know, I've gotten really good at cutting people verbally, for lack of a better term. So what ends up happening is, I know I can make this person coachable. I know it's going to take a long time.
Okay.
And because they're going to have to come to it themselves. But before I stop, because what I do is I stop coaching them. But before I stop coaching them, I walk up to them and I say, I mean, I still coach them.
Right.
But it becomes very transactional, right? And before I do that, I walk up to them and I say, why don't you trust me?
It's a fair question.
But also, that hurts people. They don't like that, because then I trust you. Man, I've told you not to do this 12 times, and you keep on doing it.
Yeah.
So if I've told you, and you trust me, why aren't you doing it? And they don't answer. And I tell them, when you're ready to trust me, I'll make you better.
That's legit.
But until then,
That's
you can
legit.
keep on, doing this shit. And I don't think you're gonna get any better. You can do. I never do.
Yeah.
And you can, when you're willing to come to me, and that's what that moment was.
Mm-hmm.
When he said that, the person didn't trust him.
Yeah.
But why wouldn't you do this guard pass? You can do. I never do.
Yeah.
That's what that meant. You don't trust me? All right. When you want to trust me, you can come learn this move, and we'll start passing guards and choking people out.
Wow. Here's a question. this might be not difficult to answer as in beyond the scope of your ability. It might be difficult because there might be a lot of parts involved. I don't know. So, let's start with this. I am an athlete. I'm a high-level athlete, competitive athlete. I'm 25 years old. What do my workouts look like? Because then I want to know, what do they look like when I'm 35, when I'm 45?
Oh, okay. So there are two big answers to this question. Three big answers to this question. So
I told you.
Yeah. So the first answer of what's that going to look like for the 25-year-old is what is their training age, right? And I always joke my training age is 75. But what that really means is not how old do you feel when you train, but what it means is how many years do you have with the barbell? Okay. How many years do you have in the weight room, right? Your training is going to look very different based on that. Okay. Are you a beginner, intermediate, or advanced strength and conditioning athlete? And it has little or nothing to do with how advanced you are as a martial artist or basketball player, whatever.
Keep right. I'm sorry. I just want to turn.
No problem. So there's that. That's a big consideration, right? And on top of that, if we triage what you need to work on, what's the most important thing? What's the least important thing? There are some people who the thing I want to focus on is strength. Okay. You need to build your strength. And there are some people I have who come in who are already freakishly strong, and that's an important thing. There's like a point where you're strong enough for your sport, right? Where I am right now, I am way stronger than any martial artist needs to be. And a lot of my athletes say, I want to be strong like you, and I say, no, you don't. You want to be 60% as strong as I am, and you want to be a black belt while I'm still a purple belt. That's what you should be doing. Gotcha. You know, because if you were half as strong as me, you'd be strong enough.
Right.
You didn't make the choice to go compete in powerlifting and compete in strongman. I did it for years. Right. So I have a strength that's no strength is useless, but I have a strength that is unnecessary because it's no longer gonna. If I get any stronger, like if I put 400 more pounds on my deadlift, I'm not passing Moreno's guard. Right. You know what I mean? I've gained the advantage I'm going to gain from it. And I have some kids who come in off, especially like former football players, they come in, quote unquote, too strong for MMA. Sure. They don't need to work on strength, but their engine sucks. Right. So they need to do conditioning. Now, the other part of your question was, how does it change as the years go on? And I am dealing with that right now. Because I'm not 22 anymore. So I can't do the dumb shit I did then. I used to go out and drink and then go train and oh man. So a couple things happen as you age. And it depends on how it's like a car. The better maintained the car is, the less these things are set in stone and the more malleable they are. Right? If you don't bring your car in for service and you haven't changed the oil and like the timing belt's about to snap, like there's some issues going on, right? But if you've been on top of it, you see classic cars on the road all the time, right? So you can be the classic car. And you know what the cool thing is? What do you think when you see a classic car and it's still running around? Yo, that's awesome. Yep. And that's the old dude on the mat. Everyone's like, yo, that's awesome. Yeah. That's the classic car. And I want to be the classic car. Right on. Right on. So your capacity to recover from workouts drops. Sure. But, cool thing, the minimum effective dosing you need to adapt also gets smaller to a certain extent, depending on your training age, things like that. What ends up happening at a certain point, though, is, I think around 60 years old, you can no longer recover fast enough to drive like really good adaptations. You can still get stronger, but your ability to recover hinders how much strength and conditioning will improve you. Sure. And I train a guy who is turning 60 this weekend. I'm actually really bummed. I was going to go to his birthday party. I'm going to South Carolina, and I was like, no. So I got him a gift and wrote him a card, and he was like, I get it. Because I had already accepted the invite to this other thing. I feel terrible though. I'm like, he's such a cool dude. I've trained him for like 8 years.
Oh wow.
Yeah, and he's turning 60 this weekend. He's got a 6-pack. I mean, he's in great shape. And whenever I ask him what his secret is, he always gives me a different joke. And he loves his dad jokes. Okay. So his one is, well, I had this person paint me a portrait. It's in my attic, and if I look at it, I'll age.
Oh, so the Dorian Gray. Yeah.
And I'm like, oh, come on, man. And then the other one is, he goes, you know what it really, I love to tell you it's clean living, but it's really a combination of really good Russian drugs, you know? But he grew up as a martial artist. Doesn't do that too much anymore. But has been a lifelong yoga practitioner. Does like rock climbing, he kayaks, He's always outdoors.
That's awesome.
And he's 60 years old. He can do weighted pull-ups. You know what I mean? And he's shredded. I think he's still doing this. He was going to train and compete for a weightlifting competition because we ran the numbers. And if he goes and shows up, he qualifies for like the World Championships because he's that strong for his age group.
Damn.
So this dude's in great shape. The way Steve talks about it, and I love the way he talks about it, is the first 50, 60 years of your life, he says, treat it like a 400-meter race. The first 50, 60 years, you're gaining speed, right? Maybe even the first 40, 50 years, you're gaining speed. And then who wins the race? Not the fastest runner, but the person who holds on to that speed the best, coming around the last couple of points.
Consistency.
Right. So he's transitioned to this phase where he's now trying to say, how much of this can I hold on to?
Sure.
Right? As you... 25 to 35, not a big change. I had to change what I do, but that's because I am on such an off end of the spectrum. I was lifting like 2 or 3 hours a day, and then also doing 2 hours of martial arts, and then like, it was like, this is a lot.
Yeah.
So now I only lift 1 hour a day, But I got, what I did? I got a coach.
Yeah.
People are always like, what do you do? I consult an expert.
Yeah.
I got a coach. I got on a program. And I do less lifting now because I want to be... martial arts will be there when you come back. I can't build my house and move in for real,
Sure.
So I know I need to put that time in on the mats more than ever.